Hey guys, so we're back and we are on the final video. This is getting the 12 volt installed for the trailer and then it is off to the races. So let's just get right into it. So several things changed from the last couple of videos. One was I decided to put the battery in the nose of the trailer rather than off to the sidewall of the shower. And I actually had the wrong wire size going back to where the refrigerator was going to sit, and I actually had to change it up to a thicker wire. Originally, the wire that I'd ran to the back was actually a 14 gauge wire. And you got to be careful about this because depending on how many amps you draw and then what the length of the run is, and then of course depending on what the voltage drop, whether it's critical or non-critical, is going to determine what gauge wire to use. So in this particular case, I was running just under 15 feet, so from the nose of the trailer back to where the refrigerator is going to sit is only 12 feet, and then added in, of course, 3 feet for it to go up to the control panel, so basically right at 15 feet. Now, the refrigerator draws 7.2 amps, I think, when it's running at its max. So since there's nothing in between, you got to go to the next highest one. And in this case, it was 12 gauge. So up to 10 amps, only doing 7.5 amps, I think 7.2, 7.5, something like that. Running 15 feet at 3% voltage drop, which again, this is not really critical. But at the same time too, I don't want to starve it. So I want to have a little bit of extra room in there. So I wound up with 12 gauge. Originally, I was going to run the wire on the right side of the trailer to the back, and that changed since I moved the battery box to the front. So I'm actually just routing it to the left side of the trailer through the shore power box down the back side of the couch to the kitchenette where the refrigerator is actually going to sit. So this is a pretty basic setup. You got the wiring coming down from the lights into the fuse block and the refrigerator into the fuse block. You have the power and the negative from the battery. Power is going to go to a cutoff switch and then up to the bus bar, and then from the bus bar to the fuse panel, and then of course the negative to the negative bus bar and to the negative panel. Now I did wind up switching the placement of the two bus bars, and this was just for wiring effect because the positive is actually down here on the bottom of the fuse panel, so it just made more sense to install it there rather than over the top and back down again. Now I'm using Blue Sea Systems 12 circuit fuse block, and I've used these on other projects. They're a very reputable company. They have good top quality. Just got it off of Amazon, but definitely worth the money. They're a little pricey, they're about $50, but not too terribly bad. Now I went with the 12 circuit just in case I wanted to add some extra items along the way, but right now I've only got 4 total. So there's 3 lighting circuits which come off of one side, and I've got the refrigerator running to another circuit on the other side. So basically the way that these things wire up is you have your positive, which comes from the battery. In my case, I ran it to a cutoff switch so that I could isolate the entire system from the battery for when it's sitting in storage, so there's no drawing coming down on the battery. From that switch, it runs into a bus bar, and then from the bus bar, as you see from DC positive here, it runs into a fuse, 125 amp fuse, and then goes into the bottom of the fuse block for the positive. From the negative battery, the negative goes up to another bus bar, and then directly from the bus bar to the DC negative on the top of the fuse block. And then on the top here are all your negative leads that come off of it, and then down here is where you have all your fused positive leads that come off of it. The 4-gang rocker switch panel I got off of Amazon, and when it comes in, and I had this with the truck camper as well, one of these, they're basically all daisy chained together, and the open splay that's on the bottom there is what actually goes to whatever it is you're wiring it up, but basically they're all daisy chained together. So this is kind of a real pain in my opinion. I don't like the way that this is set up. I would actually prefer that each switch is independent. So let me kind of show you what I'm talking about. This example here is actually a 5-gang box, where mine's just a 4, but the principle is the same. Looking at the switch from the back, the top 2 leads on the top, or the top 2 spades on the top, are all ground, and these are just jumpers. So you have a common ground, and you wire it into one switch that jumps to the second position, which jumps to the next switch, which then provides a jumper to the next switch, etc., etc., etc. It's just daisy chained together. And then on the positive side, you would apply your positive to the middle lead with a jumper, which would drop down for power to light the switch, and then you actually have the line that's going out to whatever the circuit is you're providing. So if you're doing a light, this would go to a light, this would go to a light, etc., etc., etc. So I don't like this. The negative, I don't have a problem with daisy chaining, but I would prefer that all of the individual switches are on separate circuits themselves rather than ramping it through. It's just a preference. You don't have to do it that way, but I like it old school. So the way that it's set up now, each individual light comes into its own switch. It comes into the bottom there, and then the power supply coming off of the fuse block is going to go into the center position of each switch, or the number 2 blade that it comes in, and back through the fuse panel. And then the grounds are tied together from the lights with then a common ground, which will go into the daisy chain for the common ground on all the switches. Now, I did not wire the refrigerator into a switch. It basically just is power on, power off, depending on whether that disconnect switch is engaged or not. And that's just to make sure you don't accidentally turn the refrigerator off when you're in the camper. And there it is. You've got the 120 amp fuse right there. So you got positive coming up from the battery to the disconnect switch, disconnect to the 120 amp fuse to the positive bus bar, and the bus bar to the bottom of the fuse block. You got the leads coming off for the lights on the right and the refrigerator to the left. And then we have the negative that comes up to the negative bus bar. That in turn goes to the top of the fuse block, where the negative lines drop down from the overhead lights and from the refrigerator. On the refrigerator side, I just wired in a female cigarette lighter adapter because the fridge itself has a male cigarette lighter adapter just to plug into your car. So it worked just fine. Just wired in a female and just plugged it right in, and it's running perfect. With all the wiring done, all I had to do was to put the switches on the outside of the front cover there to the battery box, wire it all together, and screw it down into place.